Thank you for joining us today. And let us begin by just taking a moment or two for meditation. Closing our eyes if we're able, willing. Coming into the moment, letting go of all the transient things, all the thoughts about the transient past, the transient present, the imaginary and transient future. Reflecting on I am. I am. The phrase that God uses to define himself is also a call, I think, in our prayers, our meditations, our reflections, to accept ourselves as we are and become in tune with the awareness of I am within and at the root of our spirit.
Our reading today comes from Revelation 19, verses 11 through 17. I saw heaven standing open, and there before me was a white horse, whose rider is called Faithful and True. With justice he judges and wages war. His eyes are like blazing fire, and on his head are many crowns. He has a name written on him that no one knows but himself. He is dressed in a robe dripped in blood, and his name is the Word of God. The armies of heaven are following him, riding on white horses and dressed in fine linen, white and clean. Coming out of his mouth is a sharp sword, with which to strike down the nations. He will rule them with an iron scepter. He treads the winepress of the fury of the wrath of God Almighty. On his robe and on his thigh he has this name written, King of Kings, Lord of Lords. And I saw an angel standing in the sun, who cried in a loud voice to all the birds flying in midair, Come together for the great supper of God. These are the words of God. May she bless our reading and understanding of them.
Amen. What a crazy depiction from Revelation 19 today. Painting the picture of Christ as it has done throughout the book as something kind of shocking, somewhat horrific, I think, depending on how we interpret it. Covered in blood, right? A sword literally coming out of his mouth. Eyes like fire. And it's so interesting because I think that radical image is indeed meant to wake us up. Maybe get that fire going within us a little bit. Opening us to the radical nature of God, of Goddess. Indeed, I think a lot of the details here help to point to the transcendence of God, of our different ideas of God. Often we, depict the Lord as, a very specific Middle Eastern type of individual, or a white person or black person, in other, kind of territorial lights. And I think that's because those images of God speak to us. They reflect who we are, and we can connect with them. But as this image in Revelation shows, God is a little bit extra, so to speak, at times. God is more than our conceptions of Him. Indeed, it says God's name is one that only He knows, or at least He has His name written on Him that only He knows. But then it says in two other places within our short reading that God's name is the Word, that God's name is the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. And it uses the word name. And so that idea that the names of God are manifold points to the transcendence of often our limited thinking about the Lord. Indeed, I think when we try to limit God, put him in a box, so to speak, we tend to try to control God, control images of God. And as we see in the history of religion, often when we use God in that way, we seek to control others, condemn others. And often it's, due to our defensiveness. We've been hurt in the past. We are somewhat selfish, human beings and whatnot. But we can get on power trips and not let go of that hurtful, limited thinking. And we see the horror that it can create. It can cascade. There's a snowball effect when we start judging and limiting our ideas of who we are. We tend to hurt, destroy even. And I think that inner light, that inner sun that we see shining through the Lord's eyes in this story, and also shining from his entire bodies in early Revelation and other parts of the Bible, speaks to the divine light of awareness, of love, that we can tap into as we let go of our limited, selfish thinking. And so I think just for a moment, let's turn to a meditation as we reflect on what that would mean for us, letting go of all our limited conceptualizations and just putting it into practice for a moment. Opening our hearts to the great I am, beyond words. The name that only God knows is also written on our hearts. It's unspeakable because it's divine. But we can get to know it. We can feel it. Indeed, since that's the core of us, it's the truest us, that greater awareness that gives rise to all life. So in our meditation, let's think expansively. Let's open to the infinity within. It can often seem like that space, the space between thoughts, is empty or nothing. And although it is spacious like the sky, it actually holds all things. It gives rise to everything. The light of awareness is the root of all energy, all matter, all space, all time, all spirit. As we meditate on that great I am, going forward in every given moment, returning to it, returning to the feeling of I am, nothing more. Still doing our work, still having insight, maybe a little bit more wisdom can shine through in this state. But returning to the openness, compassionate light. And I think that's often at the root, that returning to compassion, to love, to wisdom of what Christ taught. Christ taught compassionate awareness for all. He said, love your enemies and your neighbors. He called us to a radical social justice. And indeed, it can be tough to live up to. We reflect on that from time to time. But taking those little steps, noting that people are worth our time, that we ourselves are worth our time, our patience, our care, and loving management. just holding space for those others, even in their diverse strangeness sometimes. Indeed, it's that strangeness of God's image today, I think, that also invites us to that radical acceptance of the other, to break down our walls and be a little bit more open. We see a God literally with tattoos. It says written on him is not only the name that only he knows, but it's also written on his thigh, the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. Like some of our more radical artists today, he's covered in blood, kind of to make a point, right? He's making a point about the martyrdom of so many loving people, of so many humans for God. Not just in the sense that, oh, I'm going to stand up for my beliefs and they killed me. But all those moments, all those starving masses, all those abused and cut down, who just wanted to live their life with some compassion and some peace. I think God is with us even in that type of martyrdom, even in our pain. God, in fact, is there to uplift us if we'll let him, if we'll let her. The reason the Lord shines like the sun is because God can be with all beings as an image of themselves. God is the source of all goodness, we're told, all strength, all wisdom, all awareness, all mastery. Indeed, in Swedenborg's visions of heaven, it wasn't just the men who were in the heaven that is God. It was women. It was aliens. It wasn't just one race. It was many races. Indeed, you have lush environments, even animals, other things there. Now, although he didn't believe that was our past pets, I mean, we can argue with Swedenborg on something, right? He thought this environment of heaven was made more perfect in its diversity, in its fullness and life. And so I think as we open to that light of awareness, the light that shines on our minds, often we think our minds are in charge and we let them be. But it's our awareness that shines on the workings of our minds and often enables a little bit of, distracted, habitual, sometimes hurtful thinking. It shines on our environment. Everything we've ever perceived is in our heads. It's all been within. We only perceive things from within, in the light of awareness. And indeed, that's true for all beings, all sentient life. And as we learn more about the physics of the universe, we learn that everything's made of energy, even the hardest substance. And that there's some type of conscious interaction, some type of aware point of connection between every single atom, every single minute particle. And so that awareness, that energy of light, of God's spiritual light and warmth, makes everything. And indeed, when we're talking about people, even if you don't quite follow the science, we can agree that it's about what we feel, what we connect with, what we understand, our impact on others. And so God's radical social justice, that call to love, the call to spiritual practice, to openness of spirit, where we're not judging people for, quote unquote, having another religion. I think if something had to be added to this part of Revelation, it would just be highlighting that God's name is often the name for our religions, for our faiths. And it says the true name of God, the name of God is one only He knows. So no matter our word for our faith, no matter our word for God, we can find common ground in loving compassion and wisdom, especially when we let go of the sword in our hands, where we cut down others, and instead using the Lord's words of truth, of honesty, of compassion and love, to cut down our divisions, cut down our walls, to bring us together, as it says he does with all the grapes in the winepress, to make a fine wine. I think it's interesting that it tends to talk about God treading a winepress from time to time. If you read the Old Testament, you'll notice it a few times. It's like, why is God making wine? I mean, that's cool, right? But I think if we look deeper at what it means, what it could mean for us, and how wine is used throughout Scripture, we'll see that wine is that truth that unites us, that divine truth. Not the truth in the sense that we all have to get it right one day in this exact way, my exact way, your exact way. But that shining light of truth that holds every color within it, that uplifts us into communion with God. And so each of us, kind of like a grape, God is tearing down our false walls, our misconceptions of ourselves, identifying with our bodies, our histories, our judgments, our minds, coming to note that it's actually that light of awareness that makes us who we are, that is the space we find peace in, and indeed the space where we find that natural call to compassionate social justice in action and in deed, in motive and in intention. And we find the warmth and the care of God within, in that light. Now let's take one more moment to, like the armies in our reading, following the Lord with pure reason on our white horses, so to speak, carrying us forward, as it's described in Revelation 19. Following the Lord within, that inner teacher, for a moment. Our worries, our anxieties, our judgments are always centered on something transient. You notice that? Something eventually passing, right? And the Lord indeed told us not to worry, not to fear about the future. So just noticing, letting go of the transient thoughts, letting them come and go, as we identify with the greater I am, the greater awareness, for a moment. And as we tap into that light, that warmth, even just in fits and starts, a little bit here, maybe between the gaps in our thinking, our thoughts, I think we come to know that we have everything we need. That everything, all those desires are from the root of our awareness. all that feeling of accomplishment, that consolation, that warmth, is from our awareness. You notice when you think about that thing you desire, you often think about how you'll feel. You feel how you'll feel before you have it. You remember it. So letting go of that cause and effect between our addictions and what fulfills us. Letting go of the anxiety, the pressure of society, of our own limited ideas for our self. Often when we define ourselves by our bodies, our minds, our histories, how other people view our bodies, our histories, our ambitions are hurtful, delusional. Indeed, the ground they stand on is like sand, delusional. And so returning to what is everlasting, the Lord, the Lady, in her infinity and her divinity, as we take our next steps.
Asleep in the stable, wax on the table, and tools at his ankles. Forged in the fire, letters in iron, the scar-bearing rider. And up with the sunrise, he unveils his eyes, the world at his side. In the sea of strangers, she searches among them, seeing his face in everyone beside her. In the sea of performers, she searches among them for the one rider. He put on her shoes for her, unbraided her hair, and walked her down to the fair. In the heat of the spotlight, blue shadows on white, she was a sight. And higher the sun rose, he gave her water from a garden hose, and kissed her wet nose. In the sea of strangers, she searches among them, seeing his face in everyone beside her. In the sea of performers, she searches He took off her shoes for her, and he braided her hair. Another day at the fair. He watched her round ribs rise like a barrel of wine, deep, heavy sighs. He hung up her saddle, finished the handle, and blew out the candle. Asleep in the stable, wax on the table, and tools at his ankles. He's the wild rider for 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 the
Now go forth knowing that you are quite loved.